The Trial of Humanity. Before we begin. Hey everyone at HFY Nexus Archives. Before we dive into today's story, drop a quick comment below and let me know you're here. It really helps the channel grow and reach more sci-fi fans. Now, let's get started. The accusation. The Grand Judicial Chamber of the Galactic Congress stretched higher than any cathedral built by human hands. Its walls were made of crystallized starlight, reflecting the faces of 6,000 species gathered to witness something unprecedented. They had come to judge humanity. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood alone in the center of the massive chamber. She was 53 years old, gray-streaked hair pulled back in a simple bun, wearing the plain blue uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps. No decorations, no jewelry, nothing to distract from the woman herself. Above her, arranged in ascending circles that spiraled toward the distant ceiling, sat the representatives of civilizations that had existed for thousands of years before humans discovered fire. Their forms varied wildly. Some were energy beings that flickered like living flames. Others were crystalline structures that pulsed with thought. Still others looked almost human, except for the details that marked them as alien. High Judge Caliph presided from the highest seat. He was of Rathan, tall and elegant, his skin the color of polished bronze, his eyes containing 3 pupils that rotated independently. He had served as a judge for 400 years and had seen countless species rise and fall. Ambassador Vasquez, his voice resonated through the chamber with artificial clarity. Humanity stands accused of 17 violations of galactic law. You have been given this opportunity to defend your species before sentence is passed. Elena didn't flinch. She'd known this was coming. Earth had only been part of the Galactic Congress for 15 years, and in that time, they'd broken more rules than any species in recorded history. I understand, Your Honor, she said simply. The evidence. Prosecutor Thane stepped forward. He was a Meridan, a species known for their logical minds and perfect memory. His floating form shimmered as he pulled up holographic displays that filled the air around Elena. Charge 1, Thane began, his voice cold and precise. Humanity violated the non-interference protocol by landing on Kepler 442b and providing medical aid to the indigenous population, despite that species being classified as pre-contact. The hologram showed human doctors treating alien children, their small bodies covered in lesions from a plague that was killing millions. Charge 2, Thane continued. Humanity violated the Military Restriction Act by deploying armed vessels in the demilitarized zone of Sector 7. New images appeared. Human ships, bristling with weapons, moving through space that was supposed to be neutral. Charge 3. Your Honor, Elena interrupted quietly. May I respond to each charge as it's presented, rather than waiting until the end? Caliph's 3 pupils focused on her. That is, irregular. But I will allow it. Proceed. Elena turned to face the chamber, looking up at the thousands of beings watching her. Thank you. Prosecutor Thane is correct that we landed on Kepler 442b. He's also correct that the indigenous population was pre-contact according to your laws. She paused, letting that sink in. What he didn't mention is that the plague killing them was introduced by off-world traders looking to harvest the planet's resources after the natives died out. We didn't interfere with their natural development. We stopped them from being murdered for profit. A murmur ran through the chamber. Caliph raised one hand for silence. The law is clear, Ambassador. Pre-contact species must be left alone. Even when they're being genocided by other species who are breaking that same law? Elena asked. Because if that's the case, then the law isn't about protecting developing civilizations. It's about maintaining deniability. The defense. Prosecutor Thane's shimmer intensified with irritation. The proper procedure would have been to file a report with. With whom? Elena interrupted. The investigation bureau that takes an average of 18 months to respond? By that time, every living being on that planet would have been dead. You can't file a complaint on behalf of an extinct species. She pulled out a data pad. I have the timeline right here. Human scouts detected the plague on March 3. We filed an emergency report with 3 different Congress bureaus on March 4. We received our first response on April 7, acknowledging receipt of our message. By that point, the death toll had reached 4 million. Elena looked directly at Caliph. We landed on March 5. We lost 6 doctors to the plague while developing a cure. But we saved 2 billion lives. So yes, Your Honor, we broke your law. And I'd do it again. The chamber erupted. Some species chittered in approval. Others roared in outrage. Caliph called for order 3 times before the noise subsided. You admit to the crime? He asked. I admit to saving lives when the bureaucracy of this Congress valued procedure over people, Elena replied. There's a difference. Thane pulled up the next display. Charge 2. The armed vessels in the demilitarized zone. We're there to rescue miners trapped in a collapsing asteroid, Elena said. The asteroid was owned by the Krellian Mining Corporation, which refused to send rescue ships because, quote, the economic cost of rescue exceeds the value of the personnel. She pulled up her own holographic display. Faces appeared. Young faces, old faces, faces of a dozen different species. These are the 317 beings we pulled out of that asteroid, Elena continued. 62 species represented. All of them were going to die because rescuing them wasn't profitable. So yes, we brought armed ships into the demilitarized zone. Because the mining corporation threatened to shoot down any rescue attempt as theft of corporate assets. More murmuring. Caliph leaned forward. Did you fire upon the corporate vessels? No, Your Honor. We didn't fire a single shot. But we were prepared to if they tried to stop us from saving those lives. The pattern emerges. For the next 3 hours, Prosecutor Thane presented charge after charge. Each time, Elena had the same response. Yes, we broke the law. Here's why. Humans had violated quarantine protocols to deliver food to a starving colony. They'd ignored territorial boundaries to chase down pirates. They'd broken trade regulations to provide medicine to species who couldn't afford it. Every single violation had the same pattern. Humanity had broken the law to save lives when the law itself had become an obstacle to doing what was right. By the time Thane reached charge 17, even he seemed tired. Your Honor, he said finally, I presented clear evidence of 17 violations of galactic law. The ambassador doesn't even deny them. I move for immediate sentencing. Caliph nodded slowly. Ambassador Vasquez, do you have anything to add before I render judgment? Elena was quiet for a moment. Then she spoke, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. Your Honor, members of the Congress, I want to tell you a story about humanity. About who we are and why we can't seem to follow your rules. The human story. 10,000 years ago, Elena began, my ancestors lived in caves. They were weak compared to other predators. No claws, no fangs, no armor. They should have gone extinct. She walked slowly in a circle, making eye contact with as many species as possible. But they didn't. Do you know why? Because when one of them fell, the others stopped to help. When someone was sick, the tribe cared for them. When food was scarce, they shared what little they had. Her voice grew stronger. Evolution should have killed that behavior. From a survival standpoint, it's inefficient. The strong should survive, the weak should die. That's the logical approach. She stopped walking. But humans never did what was logical. We did what was right. And somehow, that weakness became our greatest strength. Elena pulled up her own holographic display. It showed Earth, small and blue against the black of space. When we finally reached the stars and met you, we thought we'd finally found others who understood that principle. Civilizations built on cooperation and mutual support. We were so excited to join you. The image shifted, showing the Galactic Congress, its elegant spires and sophisticated technology. And then we learned the truth. You have laws about procedure, but not about justice. You have regulations about territory, but not about compassion. You've become so advanced, so civilized, that you've optimized away the one thing that makes civilization worth having. The challenge. You're judging us for breaking your laws, Elena said. But I want to ask you something. When was the last time any of you broke a rule to save a stranger? When did you last risk something precious for someone who could never repay you? Silence filled the chamber. Thousands of beings looked at each other, at themselves, at the floor. We're a young species, Elena continued. We've only been spacefaring for a century. We don't have your technology, your knowledge, your experience. But we remember something you've forgotten. She looked up at Caliph. Laws exist to serve life, not the other way around. The moment your laws require you to watch innocent beings die, those laws become evil. And yes, we'll break them. Every single time. Elena spread her hands. So go ahead. Pass your sentence. Expel humanity from the Congress. Declare us rogue. It won't change who we are or what we do. Because we'd rather be cast out for saving lives than welcomed for following rules that require us to let people die. The chamber was utterly silent now. Even the ambient sounds of breathing and movement had stopped. You accuse us of being lawless, Elena said quietly. But I accuse you of being heartless. And between those two failures, I know which one I'd rather be guilty of. She stood straight, hands at her sides, waiting for judgment. High Judge Callis sat motionless. His three pupils rotated slowly, all focusing on Elena. Minutes passed. The silence stretched and stretched until it became almost unbearable. Finally, he spoke. This court will recess for deliberation. We will reconvene in 1 standard hour. The waiting. Elena was escorted to a small chamber adjacent to the main hall. It was elegant, comfortable, and utterly empty except for her. Through the transparent walls, she could see the other delegates gathering in groups, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of sound and light. She sat down, suddenly exhausted. Adrenaline had kept her going through the trial, but now it was draining away, leaving her hollow. A soft chime announced a visitor. The door opened to reveal an unexpected guest. Ambassador Thren of the Valerian Collective, one of the oldest and most respected species in the Congress. The Valerian looked like a tree made of silver, with branches that moved like arms and a trunk that pulsed with light and patterns that Elena's translator interpreted as speech. Ambassador Vasquez, Thren said. That was remarkable. Elena managed a tired smile. Thank you. I think I may have just gotten humanity kicked out of galactic civilization. Perhaps, Thren agreed. Or perhaps you reminded us why we built civilization in the first place. The Valorian's branches rustled thoughtfully. We Valorians are 3 million years old as a species. We've seen empires rise and fall. We've watched countless civilizations make the same mistakes. We thought we'd learned from all of them. Thren moved closer. But watching you today, I realized we learned the wrong lessons. We learned how to avoid failure. We forgot why success matters. What do you mean? Elena asked. Laws protect us from chaos, Thren explained. But they also protect us from responsibility. If we follow the rules, we can't be blamed when bad things happen. It's not our fault, we followed procedure. The ambassador's light pulsed in what might have been sadness. Your species is young and foolish and reckless. But you still remember that laws are tools, not masters. And that's a lesson the rest of us desperately need to relearn. Before Elena could respond, the chime sounded again. Time to return to the chamber, the verdict that changed everything. The judgment begins. The chamber was even more crowded now. Word had spread through the Congress, and representatives who hadn't bothered to attend the trial were now packed into every available space. The air hummed with anticipation. Elena walked to her position in the center, back straight despite her exhaustion. Whatever happened next, she'd said what needed saying. High Judge Calith rose from his seat. The chamber fell instantly silent. This court has deliberated on the 17 charges against humanity, he began. The evidence is clear. The defendant admits to every violation. By the letter of our law, the sentence should be immediate expulsion from the Galactic Congress and classification as a rogue species. Elena felt her heart sink. She'd expected this, but hearing it still hurt. However, Caliph continued, and Elena's head snapped up. This court finds itself facing an unprecedented situation. The defendant has not merely broken our laws, she has challenged the very foundation upon which they rest. The judge's 3 pupils fixed on Elena. Ambassador Vasquez has forced us to ask a question we have not confronted in thousands of years. What is the purpose of law? The revelation. Caliph gestured, and holographic displays filled the air around him. They showed the charges against humanity, but this time with additional information. Charge 1, Interference on Kepler 442b. Yes, humanity violated the non-interference protocol. But as the ambassador noted, they did so to prevent genocide by off-world traders who were also violating that protocol. The display shifted. Our investigation bureau did receive humanity's report. It sat in a queue for 34 days before being assigned to an investigator. By the time that investigator began work, the human rescue operation had been complete for 3 weeks. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Caliph raised a hand for silence. Charge 2, Armed vessels in the demilitarized zone. Humanity did violate the Military Restriction Act. But they did so to rescue 317 beings from 62 different species, including some represented in this very chamber. The judge paused. 15 of those rescued individuals were family members of Congress delegates. They are alive today because humanity chose to break our law. More murmurs, these ones different. Uncertain. Uncomfortable. I could continue through all 17 charges, Caliph said. The pattern is clear. In every case, humanity violated our procedures to uphold our principles. They broke our rules to serve the purpose for which those rules were created. The real question. The judge sat back down, his expression thoughtful. This presents us with a choice. We can enforce our laws as written and expel humanity from the Congress. The rules will be upheld, precedent will be maintained, and the system will continue as it has for millennia. He let that hang in the air. Or, Caliph continued, we can acknowledge that our laws have become more important to us than the values they were meant to protect. That we have optimized civilization to the point where it no longer serves the living beings it was designed to help. The chamber was so quiet Elena could hear her own heartbeat. Ambassador Vasquez, Caliph said. You've challenged us to remember why laws exist. You've accused us of valuing procedure over life. But I want to ask you something. If we rule in your favor today, what happens tomorrow when another species breaks our laws and claims they were doing what was right? Elena took a deep breath. This was the heart of it. The real question. Your Honor, she said carefully, I'm not arguing that laws don't matter. I'm arguing that they should serve life, not replace judgment. Yes, we broke your rules. But we were also willing to face consequences for that choice. She gestured around the chamber. Every one of our violations was documented. We didn't hide what we were doing. We acted openly, knowing we might be punished. Because we believed that saving lives was worth whatever penalty you imposed. That's not lawlessness, Elena continued. That's accepting responsibility. The difference between us and actual criminals is that we're here, standing trial, willing to face justice for our choices. A new voice. Before Caliph could respond, a shimmer announced that someone had activated their right to speak. It was Prosecutor Thane. Your Honor, the Meridan said, his tone different now. Less cold, more thoughtful. I would like to amend my recommendation. Every being in the chamber turned to stare at him. I presented 17 charges against humanity, Thane continued. All the evidence supports conviction. But Ambassador Vasquez has made me realize I was prosecuting the wrong crime. He pulled up new displays. After hearing the defense, I reviewed our own records. In the past standard year, this Congress has received 4,216 emergency reports similar to those filed by humanity. These reports detailed situations where immediate action could save lives. The numbers glowed in the air. Our average response time to these emergencies was 93 days. Our resolution rate was 12%. Which means that 88% of those emergencies resulted in preventable deaths because we valued procedure over speed. Thane's shimmer intensified. The Meridan are known for logic and perfect memory. We don't make emotional decisions. So I say this from pure rational analysis, a system that consistently chooses process over results is a failed system. He turned to face Caliph. Humanity didn't violate the spirit of our laws. They exposed how far our laws have drifted from their original purpose. If we punish them for that, we're not defending civilization, we're defending its corpse. The vote. The chamber erupted. Species that hadn't spoken in centuries demanded recognition. Delegates who normally rubber-stamped decisions were suddenly engaged in passionate debate. Caliph let it continue for several minutes before calling for order. It's clear this court cannot make this decision alone, he said. This question affects every species in the Congress. Therefore, I'm calling for a full assembly vote. Elena felt her stomach drop. A full assembly meant every species would vote on humanity's fate. It would take hours, maybe days. However, Caliph continued, the question before us has changed. We will not be voting on humanity's guilt, that's already established. Instead, we will vote on this: shall we revise our legal framework to prioritize the preservation of life over the preservation of procedure? The murmuring started again, louder this time. All species will have 24 hours to debate and decide, Caliph announced. We will reconvene tomorrow at this time. Ambassador Vasquez, you are dismissed until the vote is complete. The impossible wait. The next 24 hours were the longest of Elena's life. She returned to the human delegation quarters, where her staff had gathered anxiously. What do you think? Asked Chen, her deputy ambassador. What are our chances? Elena shook her head. I have no idea. We've essentially asked them to admit their entire system is broken. That's a hard thing for anyone to accept, let alone 6,000 civilizations that have been doing things the same way for millennia. She looked out the window at the vast structure of the Congress, lights glittering across its surface like stars. But I couldn't lie. I couldn't stand up there and pretend that following bad laws is the same as being good. That night, Elena barely slept. She kept running through the trial in her mind, wondering if she'd said too much or not enough. Wondering if she'd just doomed humanity to isolation from the galactic community. Around 3 a.m, her comm chimed. It was Ambassador Thren. I thought you should know, the Valerian said, the debate is intense. I've never seen the Congress so divided. But that division means people are actually thinking instead of just following precedent. Regardless of tomorrow's outcome, you've already changed something important. Thank you, Elena said softly. That means more than you know. Get some rest, Thren advised. Tomorrow will be historic, one way or another. The assembly returns. When Elena entered the chamber the next day, the atmosphere was completely different. The formal rigidity had been replaced by an almost electric tension. Delegates were still arguing in their seats. Groups clustered together in animated discussion. Caliph called for order 3 times before the chamber finally quieted. The vote will now commence, he announced. All species shall indicate their decision. Shall we revise our legal framework to prioritize the preservation of life over the preservation of procedure? Cast your votes. The chamber filled with light as each species activated their voting mechanism. Colors, sounds, patterns, each civilization had its own way of recording decisions. The lights danced and swirled like a galaxy being born. Elena stood in the center of it all, barely breathing. The voting took 30 minutes. When it finished, the lights faded, and the results appeared on the central display. For a long moment, Caliph simply stared at the numbers. Then he looked at Elena, and something that might have been a smile crossed his face. "The vote is recorded," he said. 4,217 species in favor. 1,783 opposed. Elena's legs nearly gave out. They'd won. Humanity had actually won. However, Caliph continued, this vote creates a new problem. We've agreed to change our laws, but we don't know how. Our legal system has evolved over millions of years. Reforming it will be perhaps the most complex undertaking in galactic history. The judge's three pupils all focused on Elena. Therefore, this court proposes that humanity take the lead in this reformation. You broke our laws to show us they were broken. Now help us fix them. The new beginning. The assembly exploded into noise again, but this time it was different. Not outrage or confusion, but excitement. The kind of energy that comes when people realize change is actually possible. Caliph raised his hand for silence. Ambassador Vasquez, do you accept this responsibility? Elena took a deep breath. This was bigger than she'd ever imagined. Humanity hadn't just been vindicated, they'd been asked to reshape galactic civilization itself. Your Honor, she said carefully, I accept. But I want to make something clear. Humanity doesn't have all the answers. We're still making mistakes and learning as we go. What we can offer is a willingness to put life before procedure, and the courage to admit when systems aren't working. She looked around the chamber. This reformation can't be humanity's project. It has to be all of us working together. Because the problems we're facing aren't human problems or Valerian problems or Meridan problems, they're civilization problems. And we can only solve them together. Caliph nodded. Agreed. A reformation committee will be established, with representatives from every species who wishes to participate. Ambassador Vasquez will chair the committee. He stood, signaling the formal conclusion of the proceedings. This assembly is adjourned. The work begins immediately. The aftermath. Weeks later, Elena sat in her office, surrounded by data pads and holographic displays. The Reformation Committee had grown to include representatives from over 2,000 species. They were tackling everything from emergency response protocols to legal definitions of rights and responsibilities. It was exhausting, frustrating work. Every species had different ideas, different values, different needs. But slowly, painfully, they were building something new. A chime announced a visitor. Ambassador Thren entered, branches rustling with amusement. I thought you should see this, the Valerian said, pulling up a holographic display. It showed a report from the border regions. A Krellian mining vessel had suffered a catastrophic failure. Instead of debating jurisdiction and procedure, 3 different species had immediately dispatched rescue ships. They'd saved everyone aboard in under 6 hours. The rescue coordinator cited something called the Vasquez Principle, Thren said. When life is at stake, act first and argue about rules later. Elena smiled despite her exhaustion. I never said that. No, Thren agreed. But you lived it. And now others are learning to do the same. The Valerian moved closer to the window, looking out at the vast Congress structure. You know, we thought we were so advanced. So civilized. But we'd forgotten the most basic truth, civilization exists to protect and nurture life, not to regulate it. You remembered, Elena said quietly. Eventually. Because you made us remember, Thren corrected. And that, Ambassador, is the most valuable gift one civilization can give another. The legacy. 6 months after the trial, the Reformation Committee released its first major revision to galactic law. The new protocols were simpler, more flexible, and explicitly prioritized saving lives over following procedure. More importantly, they included what became known as the conscience clause. Any being could break the law if they genuinely believed doing so was necessary to prevent immediate harm to innocents. They would still face judgment, still have to justify their actions, but the law acknowledged that rules weren't always right. Critics said it would lead to chaos. Supporters said it would lead to justice. both were probably correct. But what everyone agreed on was that something fundamental had changed. The Galactic Congress was no longer just a bureaucracy. It was becoming what it had been meant to be all along, a community. Elena stood in the observation deck of the Earth Embassy, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, human ships were still breaking rules when they thought it was right. But now, more often than not, they had company. Valorians, Meridans, even some Krellians were learning to value life over regulation. It wasn't perfect. There were still problems, still conflicts, still species who clung to the old ways. But change had begun, and it was spreading. Her comm chimed. A message from Earth. They wanted her to return home for a ceremony. Apparently, she was being awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor for services to humanity and galactic civilization. Elena smiled. She'd spent months expecting to be expelled from the Congress in disgrace. Instead, she'd accidentally started a revolution. But that was humanity for her. They never did what was expected. They just did what was right. And somehow, that kept turning out to be exactly what the galaxy needed.